Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 90. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and I'm really excited to bring to you the third installment of our ally conversations. So in episode 83, I introduced this new concept in the episode Dear White Men. And then in episode 86, I did my first interview with Joe Drayton, the president of the National Bar Association. So he was the first true ally conversation guest. And today I get to interview Pankit Doshi, the president of the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, often referred to as NAPABA. Pankit is a partner at McDermott, Will, and Emery in their San Francisco office. He focuses his practice on employment law, and he has been recognized by super lawyers in both Southern and Northern California, including a Rising Star since 2008. He also received the inaugural Young Luminary Award Rising Star in 2011 by the South Asian Bar Association of Southern California. Pankit was a member of the ABA Tips Leadership Academy and was involved with ABA Tips for quite some time, as well as with NAPABA. And as I mentioned earlier, he is currently serving as the president. I am so excited to have him on, so let's go to the interview now. Pankit, welcome to Hustle and Flow. Thank you so much for coming on and being a guest.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right. So I know you're the president. Is it for another week or two?
We got about 2 more weeks left until our annual convention starts.
Okay. So I think I read correctly that it is your 30th anniversary. Now, is that the 30th anniversary of the conference or of the association?
It's the 30th year anniversary of the organization, which is the same as when we had our first annual convention.
Okay, perfect. So tell us a little bit about the history. I mean, 30 years, that's pretty young. So tell us how NAPABA came about.
Sure, absolutely. So NAPABA was formed roughly about 30 years ago in a watershed moment stemming from the brutal death of Vincent Chin. Before then, there had been a number of Asian Pacific American bar associations in local areas around the country, such as in the San Francisco Bay Area, but there had never really been a national organization. And in 1982, Vincent Shin, a Chinese American man, was celebrating with some friends in Michigan. It was in the 80s, around the time when the U.S. auto industry was faced with some troubles, and there was some concern the Japanese auto manufacturers were sort of coming into the U.S. And Vincent Shin was outside, or was at a nightclub. He was mistaken by 2 Caucasian auto workers for being Japanese, and they viciously attacked him, and they blamed him for being out of work. They repeatedly struck him in the head with the baseball bat, amongst other things, and he died a couple days later. And it was that hate crime and the fact that the 2 individuals they were charged with second-degree murder, but they ultimately never ended up spending a day in jail. Wow. And that was a wake-up call for the Asian Pacific American community that looked at this from the perspective of, we don't need to identify as Chinese American or Japanese American. We need to all band together as an Asian Pacific American community and really come together to address the anti-Asian bias and racial intolerance and hate crimes that were happening. And that was the basis for what ultimately formed NAPABA. It came from this civil rights background, which has kind of led us today.
Yeah, because when I think of affinity groups today, I think of it more in terms of, helping members advance within the legal profession, but it sounds like that is not why NAPABA was formed at all.
That's not what led to the original formation of the organization. NAPABA's mission is it's twofold. It's to promote the professional development of Asian Pacific American attorneys around the country, but it's also to promote justice and equity and opportunity for the community as well, and to essentially be the national voice of the Asian Pacific American legal community. And so it was that unfortunate event that really led to folks around the country coming together, our founders, to say, we really need to band together as a community. And we've never forgotten our civil rights mission and purpose. And it's just as important today in light of issues that are going on as it was back when we were founded.
So let's talk about that. You know, when you think of hate crimes, oftentimes there is very little discussed really about the Asian community, even though we have, a very long history of doing that in America. So, what are the projects that you have going on right now where you're really front and center and trying to work on those issues?
Absolutely. So one of our initiatives for this past year was tackling the issue of hate crimes, especially in light of the fact over 2 years ago, or certainly at least in the past 2 years, the percentage uptick in the number of hate crimes happening around the country has gone up significantly. Yep. I myself was subject to some version of that about 2 years ago, shortly after the presidential elections, where myself and my wife and some friends of Iranian descent were at a restaurant in San Francisco. We had a Caucasian couple come up to us and tell us essentially to stop talking about whatever it was we were talking about, to go back to our country. And then the gentleman said to me, shouldn't you be driving a cab? And all of us at the restaurant were so flabbergasted and really didn't know what to expect. And I, who'd born and brought up in this country in California, had never been talked to like that, let alone in my adult life. And we were just shocked that somebody would have the audacity to do that. And they were ultimately escorted out of the restaurant before it could escalate. But the fact that in today's day and age, things like this are still happening, it's extremely scary. And then you advance that to actual physical violence against Sikh American, Muslim Americans that wear turbans. And there have been hate crimes all around the country, specifically targeting communities irrespective of background or ethnicity. It's almost like everyone's fair game. So what NAPABA has done, really stemming from all of this, and it's been a continuation of our mission, but it's to take sort of a different approach to this issue, which is how do we educate lawyers on hate crimes, and how do we utilize the formation of bar associations and leaders within bar associations to empower and educate our community, because lawyers have the best chance to be on the front lines of this issue. So local bar associations can go to the communities and say, if you know of something, if you have an issue, you can come to us and we will help you address how specifically to rectify a wrong that's been done. And so we've been going around the country promoting this specific project. We have a hate crimes toolkit on our website, again, to educate and empower the community on this.
That is so important. And I have to say, Pankit, just your sharing that story, I think for many minorities, those kinds of conversations, or at least in my experience, you don't hear too much about them, right? And there's this perception, and I'm speaking from a white person here, that well-educated, attorneys, even if they're from different ethnic backgrounds, they don't experience, any kind of real discrimination or bias, let alone a hate crime. And when I'm in closed circles, I hear about these stories, and it's not a rarity. It seems to be more of a regular occurrence. But it seems like when we are talking, I guess, to people at large, whether it's in your firm or a legal community, these conversations aren't being had. So just being willing to share your own story and encouraging others to share theirs, I think is really impactful.
I would agree with that. And thank you for that. I thought the same thing myself, that I'm an attorney. First of all, who would speak to me like that? I'm out there on the front lines advocating specifically to help people avoid issues like this. And here it is happening to me. And if it were to ever happen to me, I know exactly what to say and how to deal with it. And I'll be the first person to say, I didn't know what to say. I was so shocked and surprised. And fortunately, it did not escalate. But it's absolutely everybody sharing their story and knowing how to get assistance when something like this happens is incredibly important. We've seen an uptick as well when it comes to issues against minority related to the travel ban that had gone into effect. And again, hearkening back to Asian Pacific American history, there was a lot of parallels between the president's executive order on the travel ban compared to the president's executive order, which led to the internment of Japanese Americans back around the time of World War II.
Right.
And so when we see history repeating itself, we know that as an organization, we just, our role is still just as important as ever.
That really, really resonates with me. I have to say, like, I want to now have this conversation for over an hour because I'm already learning a lot just in the in the short time we've talked. I do want to talk about the portrait project because that I also think is having a huge impact, or I hope it is. So when I was preparing for this particular podcast interview, I actually found it really difficult to find any information about Asian American attorneys regarding pipeline and retention. Like, there's hardly anything out there. And I then found the portrait project that you guys have on your website, which is filled with a ton of information, but is still, limited in scope because there's not really been much data collected or any kind of, real research or collection of data related to Asian Americans in the legal industry. So I thought I would just let you tell a little bit about the portrait project, and then perhaps we could talk about some details in it.
Absolutely. So the portrait project was a study done by California Supreme Court Justice Goodwin Liu, sponsored by NAPABA and in conjunction with Yale Law School. It was done a couple of years ago, and really the purpose was, to your point, Heather, was to get data together on what has been the Asian Pacific American attorney experience in the United States, in the legal profession, what's been working, what has not been working, because there had not been as many extensive studies done in the past. And this was an extensive study with focus groups looking at data, really digging deep into details that had never been uncovered before. And when the results of the study came out, even though we knew things weren't good, we were frankly shocked by the numbers. Just to give you what some of those are, since 2000, the number of Asian Pacific American lawyers has grown from 20,000 to about 53,000 attorneys, comprising nearly 5% of all lawyers nationwide. The number of Asian Pacific American law students has increased over the last decade, but in the last few years, the number of enrollment of Asian Pacific American attorneys in law schools has been the lowest than it's ever been in more than 20 years. And Asian Pacific Americans attorneys have been the largest minority group in major law firms after law school, but they have the highest attrition rates and the lowest ratio of partners to associates than any of the other groups. There were also statistics in there about Asian Americans graduating from the top 30 law schools, but they still comprised only a small percent of judicial law clerks or positions in government or public service. And even in those categories, they didn't have leadership positions. As a whole, the study also showed that Asian American attorneys experience having inadequate access to mentors, not having the appropriate contacts as barriers to career advancement, that there's implicit bias and stereotype perceptions as well. And so all of this comes out, and we look at this from a percentage perspective, and the numbers speak volumes that there is a lot of work that needs to be done still.
It's interesting. I bulleted what I thought were the biggest takeaways for me that shocked me the most, and you have covered them all except one. So we definitely were having the same biggest takeaways. The other was the mental health issues. For me, so with, we all know the legal profession, we already have crazy high rates for depression, anxiety, alcoholism, suicide. It was really eye-opening for me to learn that it's even higher for the Asian Pacific legal members.
That's right. It's according to the study, it's at a higher rate than the legal profession as a whole. So this past year, we NAPABA formed a wellness committee to specifically address this issue, and it's part of the challenge and the difficulty in determining information like this on health and wellness is culturally. Oftentimes, the Asian Pacific American community doesn't talk about issues like this very openly. You're sort of just supposed to deal with it. It can be a sign of embarrassment, perhaps even weakness. And so we really want to promote people coming out and directly addressing issues like burnout and fatigue. And if you're not achieving successes the way you want, you just get discouraged, or you're just toiling around and not advancing your career the way that you want. And then it leads to substance abuse. And it oftentimes happens in our community where issues like this are brushed under the rug. And it's been an important priority for us to make sure that we have an open dialogue on this.
So speaking of the wellness, I mean, part of it is, I'm sure, as you said at the end, that if you're not succeeding the way you would like to, right? Like if you're not getting those leadership positions, if you are not being promoted to partner, if you don't get those clerkships, it can become very overwhelming. What do you see, either from your own personal experience or from, serving in the role of president as NAPABA? What are the issues there? Like, what is causing this? I mean, we're talking a little bit about implicit bias, but where is the real rub in helping Asian Pacific lawyers be able to not just enter into the legal profession, but truly excel?
Absolutely. It's a combination of, and it sort of goes back to the Portrait Project study, but because Asian Pacific American attorneys have such low rates of conversion into leadership positions, whether it's in law firms or whether it's in corporate legal departments, whether it's political appointments, whether it's rising through the ranks in whatever part of the profession you're in, that leads to a lot of frustration, that leads to a lot of challenges. If you are not getting promoted and your Caucasian counterpart is, and you don't have the tools or the skill sets to really appreciate what it is that you need to do to move up to the next level, that can be incredibly frustrating. We also have challenges, I think, in the profession itself, where we can oftentimes have business models that promote a lot of work without balance, really. And so oftentimes you might be practicing law and being a client relationship person and engaging in a number of other activities. And so this ability to try to balance and the ability to try to work together and grow can be an issue. And we've seen it. NAPABA had an initiative called the 20 by 20 initiative, which was to get 20 Asian Pacific American General Counsel in the Fortune 500 by 2020. This year we got to 23, much earlier than our goals, but it was a challenge, and we had to do a specific initiative and training programs and get everybody together to really identify what are the issues are, set targeted goals, and then try to achieve them. Short of that, by happening on its own, it's a problem. It continues to be a challenge.
One of my biggest frustrations, and I often get on this soapbox with diversity initiatives in general, is that it seems like we're adding more diversity directors. We're making it, a point in law firms and companies, but oftentimes that money is being spent more from, in my opinion, it's more of a PR. It's about sponsoring events, but it's not about spending money on the actual individuals to get them the training and resources they need. So I'm just curious if you agree with me or not.
It's a good point. And I think it's because the issue of diversity and inclusion, it's a challenging issue. It's easy to say that clients want that and let's have diverse teams and let's have programming in place. But I agree with you. What's happening at the individual micro level? And I'll give you an example. In my law firm, what's really important from a diversity and inclusion perspective is what are we doing to help the individual diverse attorneys? Do we have mentors? Do we have professional development? Can we get you a business development coach? Do we have programming? Do we have a community and a safe space for you to get together? Are there check-ins? Do we have plans put into place? If you just have a diversity program for the sake of having one, I don't believe that it's effective. If you have the individual attention, that's really what takes. And sometimes it can happen organically, but the structure at an organization like a law firm has to be there to really make a difference.
Well, I love that you guys are setting goals, you're setting metrics, and you're saying this is what we want to accomplish, and we're going to put, training and resources behind it to make it happen. I think that's what everyone's going to have to do, whether it's organizations, firms, to really make a difference, because it's quite obvious with every single group except for male Caucasians, we're not really, I guess it's steady for them too. Everything is steady. We're trying to focus a lot on this, but the numbers are barely budging over, even multiple decades. So let me ask you this. We were talking a little bit about implicit bias, and, I want to ask you about a stereotype. So a personal fact for you is that you skipped 3 years of high school. You started college at the age of 14. You graduated college at the age of 18. And then you took a year off, went to law school, and then graduated at 22, right? So, and I think that was a fun fact, one of the youngest in California 15 years ago. And so to me, that is very stereotypical of what you might expect from an Asian American. So my question for you is, does that help? Like, does it allow you to play to that advantage of the stereotype, or is it not helpful at all?
No, it was hard to get dates. But you're right, Heather. It goes into this model minority myth that is sometimes put upon Asian Pacific Americans. I'll say that experience for me was a unique one. I don't know very many people that have really gone through that. It was kind of a unique program, but that is a challenge for the Asian Pacific American community, that, you're going to some of the best schools, you are achieving the highest grades, you're getting at the highest levels when it comes to education. So do you really face the same issues as, let's say, other diverse groups? And the answer is a resounding yes. And it's a yes because Asian Pacific Americans encompass a wide range of ethnic groups. It includes South Asian, includes Chinese, Korean, Filipinos, Vietnamese, Bangladeshi, Nepalese. It's a wide group of community members, some of which have achieved some successes in education, others which may not have, some of which have larger groups, others which don't, some of which economically have achieved success, and others which are still struggling through it. And so as a group, as a whole, our community still faces the same issues. We face the same issues of advancement and going up in one's career. We face the same issues of having those soft skills and leadership skills. There is currently a very contentious lawsuit that I'm sure you've heard about against Harvard, where the allegation is that does Harvard discriminate against Asian Pacific Americans as part of its admissions process?
Yeah.
And it's a very challenging issue there. On the one hand, there are a lot of Asian Pacific Americans applying to some of the best schools and having the qualifications to do so. But on the other hand, an issue like affirmative action, which is a strong policy priority for NAPABA, is still just as relevant today as it ever was. And having that criteria when it comes to admissions is still very important. So there is still much more to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, before I get to, I'm watching our time and I know we have to wrap up soon. Before I get to some very specific question about allies on the portrait project. So one of the things I find is that with like a lot of affinity groups, you know, you have this wonderful, wonderful, I mean, I'm going to call it a PDF, but it's obviously much more than a PDF. Not to call it an echo chamber, but, you know, it's one thing to have your members have access to this. How do you get these stories and how do you get this data in front of the legal profession as a whole?
We've been working very closely with developing a portrait project 2.0, as we call it, in conjunction with the American Bar Foundation, ABF. We've also collaborated with the ABA. And really the idea is we've been doing focus groups around the country about not only how do we take this data and effectuate change from it outside of just the world we live in, but how do we sort of do continuation project? How do we measure successes or goals that we've created and whether we've accomplished those goals? And so we have been taking that on the road and working with the ABF to really build on, this is just the first step of the process. We've done the clear issue spotting, we're setting goals, and then we want to make sure to find ways to achieve them and achieve them together as a community.
That's awesome. And for everyone listening, we will put a link in the show notes so that you can go read the Portrait Project. And it is very, very well done. There is so much information in there, and I learned so much. So I highly encourage you to go read that. So in addition to that, though, in addition to just getting educated a little bit, Pankit, what would you say from an ally position, right? If someone really wants to be an ally, what is the most important thing, or just one really important takeaway that someone can do to make sure that they are truly supporting and helping Asian Pacific Americans in the legal industry?
I would say that there's a lot of things that can be done, but one of the things is really to just walk hand in hand together with us in solidarity as a much larger community than just the Asian Pacific American community, so that we advocate for and advance issues like advancement of attorneys of color or women attorneys, or we talk about promotion issues, we talk about civil rights advocacy, where we can do that together and collectively. I'm very proud of the fact that NAPABA is one of the founding members of the Coalition of Bar Associations of Color, which is what we call CBAC, and it was formed back in 1992, along with the Hispanic National Bar Association, the National Bar Association, and the National Native American Bar Association. And collectively, we represent over 200,000 diverse attorneys around the country. And so when we all come together to talk about issues that are important for diverse attorneys in the legal profession, we really talk about how collectively can we use our voices to make a difference. And so walking together in solidarity and having a strategic plan in place, that I would say is the most important. And then I would say the second thing would be really looking at our internal implicit biases. That's a challenge that sometimes we don't realize we have those biases, which is why they're frankly implicit. Right. But we all have them, or most of us certainly do. Sure. And it's incumbent on all of us to just pause and take a step back. And so if we see an Asian Pacific American associate at a law firm, head tucked to the ground, working away, working hard, it's incumbent, I think, on all of us to say, okay, well, let's look at your career as a whole. Are you developing relationships? Are you doing professional development? Are you thinking about business? Let's help shape you. Let's be a mentor, because it's very hard to advance here in this profession without a mentor. And I will say that as a whole, when we talk about the numbers being low and we talk about we're not where we want to be, if we compare it to 30 years ago when NAPABA was formed and the type of hate crime that happened with Vincent Shin, we have come a long way as diverse attorneys, and specifically Asian Pacific American attorneys. Just this past year alone, there have been more Asian Pacific American judges nominated to the federal courts than in prior years. And so when we look at what the successes and the achievements we've made are, there's still a lot more work to be done, but we've been moving forward, and that's really inspiring for me.
So let me ask you this on the solidarity piece. So the mentoring, I think, is great. But sometimes, let's say you're an associate and you're looking at another associate, you might not be in the place to do that mentoring, but the solidarity piece is there. But so I have a question for you. So for those of us that are white, should we be showing up to like the NAPABA convention or showing up to, diverse conventions and just listening, just showing up to listen? Or is it more important for us to be providing financial resources or simply to be asking our friends and colleagues, what did you discuss at that convention? What's important to you? Where do you think we can show up to support that solidarity more than we are now?
I would say it's all of the above. We're an inclusive organization. It would be great to have everybody from all walks of life, irrespective of skin color or gender, to attend our annual convention, to be involved, NAPABA members, to step with us in the good fight. And not only to come and listen, but also to speak up and to share one's perspective and to share ideas. It's that collaboration that can really allow us to move forward. I don't want us, when I say us, the Asian Pacific American legal community, to just be talking in a bubble. All are welcome to talk together to tackle these really challenging issues of diversity and inclusion, especially champions of those issues. How can we all work together to move the needle and advance the ball? And so, yes, I would absolutely encourage folks showing up, participating, being active, supporting in any way that can possibly be done. And it's mutual, and it's whatever we can all do together. I think our collective voices are more impactful than just having smaller voices.
I got so much out of that interview, and I really hope that you did as well. I would love for you to come and join Pankit and me in that LinkedIn group that I mentioned. To join us, all you have to do is go to heatherjoyhubbard.com/LinkedIn. That will immediately let you request to become a member of that group on LinkedIn, and we will approve you to do so. And Pankit will be guest hosting, so he will be sharing posts this week related to NAPABA and things that are important to their members. And we would love for you to come and support him, support NAPABA, and join us in that conversation. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and I will talk to you soon. I am super excited to announce that the Life and Law Planner is officially here. It is more than just a calendar. It is a full planning system. If you want to take back your days, your weeks, your months, and your year, order your planner now. It will completely change your life and help you accomplish your biggest goals. There's only a limited quantity available, so go to lifeandlawplanner.com and order yours today.